Ibrahim had imagined this moment 1,000 times, the day he would return home, rich, successful, and finally ready to reclaim everything he left behind. But as his car slowed in front of his family's grand gate, something felt wrong. A woman in torn clothes was being shoved away, her voice breaking as she begged to be heard. Beside her, a little boy clung tightly to her arm, crying. Then suddenly looked straight at Ibrahim and whispered, "Daddy." The word hit him like a storm, because in that broken child's eyes, Ibrahim saw something he couldn't ignore. If you're watching from anywhere in the world, drop your country and local time below and don't forget to subscribe. This story might change the way you see love, truth, and family forever. Ibrahim Musa did not step out of the car immediately. His hand rested on the door handle, fingers tense as if the simple act of opening it would collapse the fragile line between who he used to be and who he had become. Outside, the late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the compound walls of his family's estate in Kano, a place he had once called home, but had not seen in over a decade. He had left as a nobody. He had returned as a man the world now knew. In America, Ibrahim had built an empire from nothing but stubborn resilience and sleepless nights. He had arrived there with one suitcase, a borrowed jacket, and an accent people mocked. He worked jobs no one wanted, cleaning offices after midnight, loading cargo before dawn, surviving on meals that barely filled his stomach. There were nights he slept on cold floors, nights he questioned if he had made the worst mistake of his life. But Ibrahim Musa was not a man who broke easily. He learned, he adapted, he endured. Over time, his sharp mind and quiet determination carved a path forward. He studied business by watching others, by failing, by trying again. He saved every dollar, invested carefully, and slowly built connections. Years passed. Small ventures became larger ones. Losses turned into lessons. And one day, almost without realizing it, Ibrahim was no longer struggling to survive. He was leading, owning, expanding. Now his name opened doors. Now people listened when he spoke. Now he had more money than he had ever dreamed possible. Yet none of it filled the emptiness that had followed him across oceans. Because no matter how far he had gone, a part of him had always remained here in Nigeria, in this very compound. In memories he had never truly escaped, and in a name he had never stopped whispering in the quiet of his mind. Zainab. The sound of it still carried weight, even now. Ibrahim exhaled slowly and finally pushed the car door open. His polished shoes touched the dusty ground, a sharp contrast to the luxury vehicle behind him. He had deliberately chosen not to arrive with an entourage. No security team, no grand announcement, no sign of the billionaire he had become. He wanted to see the truth. He wanted to know what his home had become without the filters of wealth and expectation. But what he had just witnessed at the gate, that was not the home he remembered. He stepped forward, his gaze instinctively searching for the woman who had been pushed away. She was still there a few steps from the gate, clutching the hand of the little boy. Her clothes were worn, faded beyond recognition. Her shoulders carried the weight of someone who had fought too many battles alone. And the child. Ibrahim's chest tightened. The boy could not have been older than 7 or 8. Thin, dusty, with eyes far too aware for his age. Eyes that had seen things children should never have to see. And those eyes had looked at him, called him something that refused to leave his mind. Daddy. It made no sense. It shouldn't make sense. Yet something inside Ibrahim refused to dismiss it. He moved closer, careful, measured. The guards at the gate did not recognize him. How could they? The young man who had left years ago was gone, replaced by someone sharper, older, more composed. They barely glanced at him as he approached, assuming he was just another visitor. Good. That was exactly what he wanted. From where he stood now, he could hear fragments of the argument. "Leave this place," one of the guards barked harshly. How many times will you come here and disgrace yourself?" The woman's voice trembled, but there was something stubborn beneath it. "I am not here to disgrace anyone. I just want to speak to them. Just once. That is all I ask. There is nothing for you here." Another voice snapped from inside the gate. Female, cold, authoritative. Ibrahim's breath caught. That voice. It hadn't changed. Hajia Amina, his mother. Even from a distance he could picture her perfectly, standing tall, wrapped in elegance, her presence commanding respect and fear in equal measure. She had always been a woman who valued status, reputation, control, and weakness. Weakness had no place in her world. "I warned you before," Hajia Amina continued, her tone cutting through the air like a blade. "Stop coming here. Whatever story you think you have, keep it to yourself. My family will not be dragged into your mess." The woman Zainab. Ibrahim felt the name rise in his throat before he could stop it. Zainab stood her ground even as her hands trembled. "It is not a story," she said quietly. "It is the truth." A bitter laugh came from inside the gate. "Truth. Women like you always have a truth when they want money." The boy tightened his grip on her hand. "Mama," he whispered, his voice small, uncertain. Zainab knelt slightly, brushing dust from his face with a gentleness that didn't belong to the harsh world around them. "It's okay, Yusuf," she murmured softly. "I'm here. Yusuf." The name echoed in Ibrahim's mind. He didn't know why it mattered, but it did. "I am not asking for money," Zainab said, her voice growing steadier. "I am asking for what is right, and what exactly do you think is right?" Hajia Amina asked, her tone dripping with disdain. Zainab hesitated for a fraction of a second. Then she spoke words that made Ibrahim's entire world tilt. "My son deserves to know his father." Silence fell, heavy, dangerous. Even the guard shifted uncomfortably. Ibrahim's heart began to pound. No, that was impossible. "It couldn't be your son," Hajia Amina repeated slowly, as if tasting the absurdity of it. "And who do you think that father is?" Zainab lifted her chin, and for the first time Ibrahim saw her face clearly. Time had not been kind to her. Hardship had carved lines where there should have been softness. Pain had dimmed a light he once knew so well. But she was still her, still Zainab, and in her eyes now, there was no fear. Only truth. "Ibrahim Musa," she said. The name hung in the air like a thunderclap. Everything inside Ibrahim went still. For a moment he could not breathe, could not think, could not move. Memories crashed into him all at once. Laughter under the mango tree, whispered promises, the way she used to look at him like he was enough, even when he had nothing, and the promise he had made. "I will come back for you." Had he no? He had left, he had chased a future, and somewhere along the way, he had lost her, lost everything. "You are shameless." Hajia Amina's voice cut in sharper now. "My son is not even in this country. He has built a life far away from people like you. Do not ever use his name again." Zainab flinched, but she did not step back. "I waited for him," she said, her voice breaking just enough to reveal the years behind it. "I waited until I had nothing left to give." "Then that is your problem," Hajia Amina replied coldly. "Not ours." The gate began to close, slowly, deliberately, like a final judgment. "No, please," Yusuf cried, stepping forward instinctively. But the guard pulled him back roughly. "Go!" he snapped, and just like that, they were shut out. Ibrahim stood frozen, the weight of what he had just heard pressing down on him from all sides. Zainab, a child, his name, his past, his failure. Everything he had built suddenly felt meaningless in the face of what he had lost. Or worse, what he had abandoned. Yusuf turned again, his eyes scanning the area, and landing on Ibrahim once more. That same look, That same impossible recognition. "Daddy," the boy whispered again, softer this time. Ibrahim's heart shattered in silence. Because now, he was no longer sure it was a mistake. Long before the world knew the name Ibrahim Musa, before the suits, the wealth, the power, there had been a simpler version of him, a young man with dust on his shoes, hope in his chest, and love that felt bigger than the future itself. And at the center of that love was Zainab. Back then, Kano did not care about ambition unless it came with status. Ibrahim was just another struggling young man trying to survive, doing small jobs around the market, carrying goods, fixing broken items for little pay. His clothes were always clean, but worn, his hands rough from work, his dreams far too large for the life he had been given. But whenever he was with Zainab, none of that seemed to matter. She had a way of making the world feel lighter. Zainab was not rich, not even close. She lived with her aunt in a small, crowded house on the edge of the neighborhood, waking up before sunrise to fetch water, cook, and help sell vegetables by the roadside. Life had hardened her in some ways, but it had not taken her kindness. If anything, it had made it stronger. They met on a hot afternoon that neither of them ever forgot. Ibrahim had been helping unload sacks of rice from a truck when one of them slipped, tearing open as it hit the ground. Grains scattered everywhere, and the owner of the goods began shouting, accusing Ibrahim of carelessness. Before the situation could turn worse, a voice cut through the tension. It was not his fault. "Zainab!" She stepped forward without hesitation, kneeling down to help gather the spilled rice with her bare hands. Others joined after her, and slowly the chaos settled. The owner grumbled but backed off. Ibrahim had watched her that day, not just what she did, but how she did it, without fear, without expecting anything in return. That was the beginning. From then on, their paths seemed to cross more often than coincidence could explain. At the market, at the water well, along the narrow paths that connected one part of the neighborhood to another. Conversations started small, then grew deeper. Laughter came easily. Silence, when it happened, felt comfortable. And somewhere between shared struggles and quiet understanding, love found its way in. It was not loud or dramatic. It did not need to be. It was in the way Zainab saved him food when she knew he hadn't eaten. In the way Ibrahim walked her home every evening, even when it meant adding miles to his own journey. In the way they spoke about the future, not as something distant, but as something they would build together. "I will change my life," Ibrahim had told her one evening, sitting beneath a wide mango tree. As the sun dipped low, Zainab smiled softly. "I know you will. And when I do," he continued, his voice steady with conviction, "I will come back for you. I will give you everything you deserve." She shook her head gently. "I don't need everything. I just need you to keep your word." At the time, it had seemed so simple, so possible. But life had other plans. The Musa family was not poor. Not like Ibrahim and Zainab. They had land influence and a name that carried weight. And Hajia Amina, Ibrahim's mother, had very clear expectations for her son. She had always seen something in him, potential intelligence, the ability to rise above his circumstances. But to her, that rise had to follow a certain path, a controlled path, one that did not include a girl like Zainab. The first time she heard about Zainab, it was through whispers. People talked, they always did. A wealthy family's son spending time with a poor girl. It did not go unnoticed, and it did not sit well. "Ibrahim," she had said one evening, her tone calm but firm. "I hear you have been keeping company with someone." He knew exactly what she meant. "Yes," he replied, refusing to lie. "And who is she?" "Her name is Zainab." A pause. "Zainab, who?" He hesitated. That was the problem, wasn't it? Zainab did not come from a known family. She had no surname that carried influence, no background that could be presented with pride in gatherings like theirs. is a good person, Ibrahim said instead. But that was not the answer his mother wanted. I did not ask if she is good, Hajia Amina replied sharply. I asked who she is. Silence stretched between them. Then came the words that would begin to change everything. You are not a child anymore, she continued. Your life is not just yours. It represents this family, our name, our future. Ibrahim felt the familiar tension rise in his chest. And what about what I want? What you want, she said coldly, must align with what is right. And loving her is not right, no, Hajia Amina answered without hesitation. It is not. The conversation ended there, but the conflict did not. Days turned into arguments. Arguments turned into distance. Ibrahim tried to balance both worlds, his love for Zainab and his responsibilities to his family. But the gap between them only grew wider. Then came the opportunity. A scholarship, a chance to go to America, to study, to build a future far beyond what Kano could offer him. To Hajia Amina, it was not just an opportunity. It was a solution. You will go, she told him. This is your chance to become something greater. And Zainab, Ibrahim asked quietly. His mother's expression did not change. If she truly cares about you, she will not stand in your way. But that was not the same as acceptance, not even close. That night, Ibrahim went to find Zainab. She was waiting under the mango tree, as if she already knew. You're leaving, she said softly. He stopped in front of her, his chest heavy. It's not forever. She looked at him, searching his face for something, certainty, reassurance, anything that could hold on to hope. When she asked, soon, how long I don't know. The honesty hurt more than any lie could have. Zainab nodded slowly, her fingers tightening around the edge of her scarf. And you expect me to just wait? I expect you to believe in me, Ibrahim said, stepping closer. I will come back. I swear it. She studied him for a long moment. Then quietly, she asked, and if something changes, it won't. He said immediately, but life had already begun to prove otherwise. Zainab took a deep breath. Then promise me something. Anything. No matter what happens, she said, her voice trembling. Just slightly. Don't forget me. Ibrahim reached for her hands, holding them firmly. I could never forget you. And in that moment, he truly believed it. The night before he left, they sat together one last time beneath the mango tree. No grand speeches, no dramatic goodbyes. Just quiet words, soft promises, and a love that neither of them knew was about to be tested in ways they could not imagine. As dawn approached, Ibrahim stood. I will come back for you, he said again. Zainab forced a small smile. I will be here. He turned to leave, but something made him stop. He looked back. She was still there, watching him, holding on to something fragile and unseen. That was the last time he saw her. At least, that's what he had believed, until now, until the gate, until the child, until the truth that was beginning to unfold in ways he was not ready to face. Because somewhere between the promise he made and the man he became, Ibrahim Musa had left behind more than just a place. He had left behind a life, and now it had found its way back to him. The morning Ibrahim left Nigeria did not feel like the beginning of something new. It felt like something unfinished. The sky had been pale, almost hesitant, as if even the day itself was unsure whether to welcome his departure or mourn it. The small airport buzzed with movement, voices, luggage, hurried steps, but to Ibrahim, everything sounded distant, muted beneath the weight pressing against his chest. He had imagined this moment differently. He thought he would feel proud, excited, ready. Instead, all he felt was torn. Zainab stood a few steps away from him, her hands clasped tightly together as if holding herself in place. She had insisted on coming even when he told her it would be too painful. I want to see you go, she had said quietly. So I know it's real. Now standing there, she looked smaller than he remembered. Not physically, but emotionally, like something inside her was bracing for impact. Ibrahim adjusted the strap of his worn bag on his shoulder. It was all he had, everything he was taking into a future that felt uncertain and heavy with expectation. "I'll call you as soon as I arrive," he said. Zainab nodded. "And I'll send money," he added quickly, as if that could ease the distance already growing between them. Another nod. He stepped closer. "Say something." She looked up at him, then her eyes glistening but refusing to let tears fall. "What do you want me to say, Ibrahim?" she asked softly. "That I'm not afraid." He swallowed, because she had every right to be. "I won't forget you," he said again, almost desperately. Zainab's lips curved into a faint, fragile smile. "You already said that. I mean it. I know you do," she replied. Then after a pause, she added, "I'm just not sure life will let you keep that promise." The words lingered between them, uncomfortable, too real. A voice called Ibrahim's flight. Time. It always came too quickly when it mattered most. He reached out, pulling Zainab into a tight embrace. For a moment, she held onto him just as strongly, her fingers gripping the back of his shirt, like she was memorizing the feeling. "Come back to me," she whispered against his chest. "I will." He let go before he could change his mind, before he could stay, and just like that, he walked away. The first few months in America were a storm. Ibrahim could barely survive. Everything was different. The language, the pace, the expectations, even the air felt foreign. He moved through it all like someone learning how to exist again, from scratch. But he held on to one thing. Zainab. He called when he could. Late nights, early mornings, whenever time allowed. The connection was never perfect. Sometimes the calls dropped, sometimes the voices lagged, but hearing her even for a few minutes grounded him. "I'm working," he would say. "It's hard, but I'm managing." "I knew you would," she would reply. "And you, I'm fine." She always said she was fine, even when she wasn't. What Ibrahim did not know was that everything had already begun to change. A few weeks after he left, Zainab started feeling unwell. At first she ignored it, thinking it was just stress exhaustion, the result of everything happening too fast. But the truth had a way of revealing itself. When she finally found out she was pregnant, the world around her seemed to stop. She sat alone in the small room she shared with her aunt, staring at the test result in her trembling hands. Her mind raced, trying to process what it meant, not just for her, but for the future she had been holding on to so tightly. Ibrahim's child, a piece of him, growing inside her. Fear came first, then confusion, and finally, a quiet, overwhelming resolve. She would keep the child, because it was not just a reminder of what she might lose. It was proof of what they had shared. That night she tried to call Ibrahim, once, twice, 3 times. No answer. The time difference made everything harder. When she was awake, he was working. When he was free, she was exhausted. Days passed, then weeks. Their conversations became shorter, less frequent. And then, something shifted. One evening when Zainab finally reached him, his voice sounded different, distant. "I have to go," he said quickly. "There's something I need to handle." "It's important," she replied, her voice soft but urgent. "I need to tell you something. Can it wait?" A pause. Zainab looked down at her stomach, her heart tightening. "No," she whispered. "It can't." But the line had already gone silent. After that, the calls stopped completely. At first, Zainab thought it was just temporary, that he was busy, that something had come up. But days turned into weeks, weeks turned into months, and Ibrahim never called back. She tried reaching him again and again, but the number eventually stopped connecting. Messages went unanswered. The silence became louder than any words he could have said. To Zainab, it felt like abandonment. To Ibrahim, it was something else, entirely. Back in America, Ibrahim had not disappeared by choice. His life had taken a sharp, unexpected turn. The company he had been working for collapsed, suddenly pulling him into financial chaos he was not prepared for. Jobs disappeared overnight. Opportunities vanished. He was forced to move, to start over, to fight for stability in ways that consumed every part of him. In the middle of that storm, he lost his phone, lost contacts, lost connections, including Zainab. At first he thought he could recover everything, that he could find her again, once things settled, but things never truly settled. Each day became about survival, and survival left a little room for anything else. Still, he thought about her, often, more often than he allowed himself to admit. He told himself she was fine, that she would understand, that, one day when he had enough, when he was strong enough, he would return and fix everything. But life does not wait for the right moment. It moves forward, with or without you. Back in Kano, Zainab faced a reality she had never imagined. Her aunt was the first to notice. "You are pregnant," she said one evening, her voice sharp with accusation rather than concern. Zainab did not deny it. She couldn't. "Who is the father?" her aunt demanded. Silence, because saying his name would not change anything. It would not bring him back. It would not make people believe her. It would only make things worse. Her aunt's face hardened. "If you will not speak, then you will not stay here." And just like that, Zainab lost the only home she had. She packed what little she owned and left before sunrise, carrying not just her belongings, but a future she was not ready for. Alone, pregnant, and abandoned. The streets of Kano were not kind to women like her. Work was scarce. Judgment was everywhere. Every look carried suspicion, every whisper carried blame. But Zainab did not break. She found small jobs, cleaning, washing, selling whatever she could. Some days she ate, some days she didn't. But she kept going, because she had to, because she was no longer living just for herself. Months later, under a sky that did not pause for her pain, she gave birth. A boy. Yusuf. As she held him for the first time, tears filled her eyes, not just from exhaustion, but from something deeper. A mixture of love and loss. "He has your eyes," an old woman nearby said. Zainab smiled faintly, brushing her fingers gently across Yusuf's tiny face. "Yes," she whispered, "he does." And in that moment, she made a silent promise. If the world refused to give her justice, she would still give her son everything she could, even if it meant carrying the weight alone. The heavy iron gate of the Musa estate did not just separate wealth from poverty. It separated truth from denial. Zainab stood just outside it, her fingers gripping Yusuf's small hand as if letting go even for a second would mean losing the last piece of strength she had left. Dust clung to her worn sandals. Her dress, once a soft shade of blue, had faded into something lifeless, its edges frayed from years of use and hardship. But it was not her appearance that drew the attention of those watching. It was her persistence. This was not her first time here, and that was exactly why they had no patience left for her. "How many times will you come back here?" one of the guards snapped, stepping closer, with visible irritation. "Did we not warn you before?" Zainab swallowed, her throat dry, but her voice remained steady. "I only need to speak with them. Just once." "There is nothing for you inside," the second guard replied coldly. "Go back to wherever you came from." Yusuf shifted beside her, his grip tightening. He had heard these words before, seen these looks, felt the invisible wall that always seemed to follow them wherever they went. "Mama," he whispered softly, glancing up at her with uncertainty. Zainab looked down at him, her expression softening instantly, despite everything. She crouched slightly, brushing dust from his cheek with trembling fingers. "It's okay," she murmured. "We will not stay long." But even as she said it, she knew it was not true, because she had come too far to leave, empty-handed again. From inside, the compound footsteps approached, measured, confident, and then Hajia Amina appeared. Dressed in elegance, her presence alone commanded silence. Her wrapper flowed perfectly, her jewelry catching the light, her posture straight and unyielding. She did not need to raise her voice to be heard. One look at Zainab was enough. Disapproval. Cold. Absolute. "I thought I made myself clear," Hajia Amina said, her tone calm but cutting. "You are not welcome here." Zainab straightened, forcing herself to meet her gaze. "I am not here to cause trouble." "That is exactly what you are doing," Amina replied. "You keep coming back, repeating the same story, as if it will somehow become true." "It is true," Zainab insisted, her voice shaking now not from weakness but from the weight of being unheard for too long. "Yusuf deserves to know his father." At the mention of the child, Amina's eyes flicked briefly toward him. Only briefly, then back to Zainab. "There are many women who come with children and stories," she said dismissively. "We do not entertain such nonsense." Zainab's chest tightened. "This is not nonsense. To you maybe," Amina replied, "but to us it is nothing." The words landed harder than any slap. Yusuf looked between them, confusion clouding his young face. He did not fully understand the conversation, but he understood enough to feel the tension, the rejection. He tugged at Zainab's dress. "Mama, are they not my family?" The question cut through everything. Zainab's breath caught. For a moment she could not answer. Because how do you explain to a child that the people who should have loved him refused to even see him? Before she could speak, Amina stepped forward slightly, her expression hardening. "Take that child and leave," she said. "Do not come back here again." Zainab's eyes filled with tears, but she did not let them fall. "Not here, not in front of them. I have nowhere else to go," she said quietly. "That is not our concern." A pause. Then Zainab said something she had never said out loud before. "I waited for him." Amina's gaze sharpened. For who? Zainab held her ground. For Ibrahim. Silence. Even the guards exchanged glances. For a split second, something flickered across Amina's face. Not shock, not recognition, but irritation. As if she had heard enough. "My son is not here," she said coldly. "And even if he were, he would not concern himself with someone like you." "You don't know that," Zainab replied. "I know my son." Amina snapped. "No," Zainab said, her voice suddenly stronger. "You know the version of him you created, but I know the man he was." The air shifted, dangerously. The guard stepped closer, sensing the tension rising. "You are crossing a line," one of them warned. But Zainab did not step back. Not this time. 7 years, she continued, her voice trembling now under the weight of everything she had carried alone. 7 years I waited, I called, I searched, I hoped, and when nothing came, I still believed. Her hand tightened around Yusuf's. "I did not come here for money. I did not come here for pity. I came because this child deserves the truth." Amina's expression remained unmoved. "Truth," she repeated. "The truth is that you made your choices. Now live with them." And with that she turned slightly toward the guards. "Remove them." The words were simple, but the impact, devastating. The first guard stepped forward, reaching for Zainab's arm. "Please," she said quickly, pulling back. "Just let me speak to him. Just once. There is no one for you to speak to." The second guard replied, grabbing Yusuf's shoulder and pulling him back roughly. Yusuf cried out, startled, "Mama, don't touch him!" Zainab shouted, panic breaking through her composure as she rushed to pull him back into her arms. The movement was chaotic, desperate, and in that moment, something shifted in the atmosphere. Because someone was watching, someone who had heard every word, someone whose world was unraveling with each passing second. Ibrahim. He stood, just beyond the line of attention, his body rigid, his mind struggling to process the reality unfolding in front of him. Zainab, Yusuf, 7 years, the promise, the silence, and now, this. Every instinct in him screamed to step forward, to stop it, to reveal himself. But something held him back, not fear, not hesitation, but the need to understand. Because what he was seeing was not just pain, it was truth, and truth once revealed could not be undone. The guards pushed again, harder this time. Zainab stumbled, nearly losing her balance as Yusuf clung to her tightly, his small body shaking with fear. "Please," she whispered, her voice breaking now despite all her strength. "Just one chance." But no one listened. The gate began to close, slowly, relentlessly, like a final answer. As the metal doors shut between them, the sound echoed louder than it should have, because it was not just a gate closing. It was a door to justice, to recognition, to everything Zainab had fought for. And just like that, it was gone. Silence settled, heavy, unforgiving. Zainab stood there for a long moment, staring at the closed gate as if willing it to open again. But it didn't. It never did. Yusuf buried his face into her side, his small hands gripping her tightly. "Mama, why don't they want us?" The question broke something inside her. But still, she found a way to answer. "They just don't know us yet." She whispered softly, her voice trembling, but gentle. "One day, they will." She didn't know if she believed it. But she needed him to. Slowly, she turned away from the gate, from the rejection, from the past she had chased for too long, and began to walk. Each step heavier than the last, each breath harder to take. But she kept moving, because stopping was not an option. Behind her, hidden in plain sight, Ibrahim finally took a step forward, not toward the gate, but toward them, because now he could no longer stand still. Ibrahim did not call out immediately. His feet moved before his voice could catch up, carrying him forward as Zainab and Yusuf walked away from the gate, away from rejection, away from everything he had once promised would never happen to her. Each step they took felt like a silent accusation. Not from them, from himself. The distance between them was small, just a few meters, but to Ibrahim it felt like years. He had lost years, he had failed to show up, years that had shaped the woman and child now walking ahead of him, like strangers bound to his past. Zainab. The name slipped out before he could stop it. Soft, uncertain, but enough. She froze. Her body stiffened as if the sound had reached into a memory she had buried too deep to touch again. For a second, she didn't turn. She couldn't, because hope was dangerous. Hope had broken her once already. Yusuf looked up, first his curious eyes scanning the direction of the voice. When he saw Ibrahim, something in his expression shifted recognition without understanding. "Mama," he whispered. Slowly, Zainab turned, and time seemed to collapse. For a moment, neither of them spoke. They simply looked at each other. Ibrahim's breath caught in his throat. It was her, not the version he had preserved in memory, the girl beneath the mango tree, full of quiet laughter and unshaken faith, but a woman shaped by survival. Her face carried lines of hardship. Her eyes held stories he had not been there to witness. But it was still her. Still Zainab. Zainab's lips parted slightly, her eyes searching his face as if trying to reconcile what she was seeing with what she believed. It couldn't be. It shouldn't be. And yet, Ibrahim, she said his name, barely audible. The sound of it after all these years hit him harder than anything else that had happened that day. Yes, he replied, his voice low, steady, though his chest felt anything but. It's me. Silence followed. Heavy, loaded. Zainab took a small step back. Not forward, back. As if instinct told her to protect herself from the possibility that this was not real. You. She shook her head slightly. Confusion and disbelief tangled together. You're here, I just arrived, Ibrahim said. And you came here, she asked. Yes. A pause. Zainab let out a soft, breathless laugh, but there was no humor in it. Only disbelief, only the sharp edge of something unresolved. After all these years, she said, her voice tightening. You just show up. The words weren't loud, but they carried weight. Every unanswered call, every night she had waited, every moment she had held on to hope until it became something painful. I didn't know, Ibrahim started. No, she cut in her voice, rising just enough to stop him. Don't say that. He froze, because he heard it. The pain, the anger she had buried for too long. You didn't know, she continued, her eyes glistening now despite her effort to stay composed. You didn't know what happened to me. You didn't know I waited, that I called, that I searched for you until there was nothing left to hold on to. Ibrahim opened his mouth, but no words came. Because everything she said was true. I lost everything, Zainab went on, her voice trembling now under the weight of it. My home, my dignity, my place in this world. And all I had left was a promise you made. She looked at him, then not as the man she loved, but as the man who had broken her. And you disappeared. The accusation hung between them, unavoidable, unforgiving. I didn't leave you like that, Ibrahim said finally, his voice rough with the effort to explain. Things happened. I lost my job. My contacts, everything. I tried to find you again, but you didn't, Zainab said. Simple, final, and more painful than any explanation. Yusuf shifted beside her, looking between them with growing confusion. Mama. Who is he? He asked softly. The question cut through the tension like a blade. Zainab hesitated, for the first time since turning to face Ibrahim. Uncertainty crossed her expression, because no matter what she felt, this moment was no longer just about her. It was about Yusuf. Ibrahim's gaze moved slowly to the boy. Up close, there was no denying it. The resemblance, the eyes, the way he held himself even in uncertainty. Something deep inside Ibrahim stirred something instinctive, undeniable. What's your name? He asked gently. Yusuf looked at him cautiously, then back at Zainab, seeking permission. She nodded slightly. Yusuf, the boy replied. Ibrahim swallowed. Yusuf. He repeated the name, settling heavily in his chest. Why did you call me? Daddy, he asked, his voice careful, almost afraid of the answer. Yusuf blinked, confused by the question. Because, he said slowly, Mama said my father's name is Ibrahim. The world tilted, just slightly, but enough. Ibrahim's heart began to race. He looked at Zainab, really looked, and in her silence, he found the answer he had been avoiding. You told him about me, he said. Zainab's expression didn't change. I told him the truth, she replied. A pause. Then Ibrahim asked the question that had been building inside him since the moment he saw them at the gate. Is he mine? The air seemed to still. Even the distant sounds of the street faded into the background. Zainab held his gaze, unflinching, and then, yes, she said. One word. But it carried 7 years of silence, 7 years of struggle, 7 years of a life he had not been part of. Ibrahim felt something inside him break and form at the same time, because the truth was undeniable now. He had a son who had grown up without him. A son who had stood at the gate of his own family's home and been rejected because of him. Ibrahim ran a hand through his hair, his mind racing, trying to catch up with a reality that had arrived too suddenly, too forcefully. "I didn't know," he said again, quieter this time. Zainab didn't respond, because it didn't matter anymore. What was done was done. Yusuf stepped slightly closer to Ibrahim, curiosity overcoming hesitation. "Are you really my father?" he asked. The innocence in his voice made Ibrahim's chest tighten painfully. He knelt down slowly, bringing himself to the boy's level. For a moment, he couldn't speak. Because how do you answer a question like that? When you've already missed so much, He began, his voice unsteady, but then he stopped. Because this was not a moment for uncertainty. This was a moment for truth. "I don't know everything yet," he said honestly. "But I promise you, I will find out." Yusuf frowned slightly, not fully understanding. Zainab crossed her arms, her expression guarded again. "You want proof?" she asked. "I want the truth," Ibrahim replied. "You already have it," she said. "Then let me confirm it," he insisted. A long silence followed. Zainab studied him carefully, as if trying to decide whether he deserved even that. Finally, she nodded. "Fine," she said. "Do what you need to do." Ibrahim stood slowly, and until then she added her tone, cautious. He looked at her, then at Yusuf, and something in his expression changed, from uncertainty to decision. Until then, he said firmly, "You're not going anywhere." Zainab frowned. "What does that mean?" "It means," Ibrahim continued, his voice steady, now grounded in something deeper than emotion, "I'm not letting you walk away again." "You don't get to decide," that she replied. "No," he agreed, "but I do get to decide what I do next." A pause, then with quiet conviction, "I'm going to make this right." For the first time since he approached them, Zainab didn't have an immediate response, because part of her still remembered the man who once made promises beneath a mango tree, and part of her was afraid to believe him again. Zainab did not trust promises anymore, not even when they came from the man she had once believed in with her whole heart. She stood still for a moment after Ibrahim spoke, her arms crossed tightly against her chest as if holding herself together. The street around them moved on as if nothing had happened, people passing by, vendors calling out, life continuing in its usual rhythm. But for her, everything had shifted. "You're going to make this right," she repeated slowly, her voice carrying both disbelief and exhaustion. "Do you even understand what right looks like anymore, Ibrahim?" He didn't answer immediately, because the truth was, he wasn't sure, not completely. 7 years was not something you could fix with a sentence. It wasn't something you could undo with intention alone. It was time, loss, silence, pain that had settled into bones and become part of daily life. "I know I can't change the past," Ibrahim said finally, his voice steady but low, "but I can take responsibility for what comes next." Zainab shook her head slightly, her lips tightening. "Responsibility," she echoed. "Where was that when I needed it?" The question hung between them, not demanding an answer, just stating a truth. Yusuf, sensing the tension, stayed close to Zainab, his small fingers gripping the edge of her dress. His eyes moved between the two adults, trying to piece together a story he had never been fully told. "Are we going home, Mama?" he asked quietly. The word home felt heavy, because Zainab knew exactly what that meant. A single room she rented on the edge of the city, a place with cracked walls and a leaking roof when it rained, a place that barely held together the life she had built from nothing. She looked down at him, forcing a gentle expression, despite everything swirling inside her. "Yes," she said softly. "We are going home." Ibrahim's gaze sharpened slightly. "Let me take you," he said. Zainab's reaction was immediate. "No." The firmness in her voice surprised even herself. "I don't need your help," she added quickly. Ibrahim held her gaze. "This isn't about what you need. It's about what I owe." "You don't owe me anything anymore," she replied, but even as she said it, she knew it wasn't true. He owed her answers. He owed Yusuf a father, and maybe, just maybe, he owed himself the courage to face what he had lost. "I'm not asking for permission," Ibrahim said calmly. "I'm asking for a chance." Zainab hesitated. That word again. Chance. It had once meant everything to her. Now it felt like a risk she couldn't afford. Before she could respond, Yusuf spoke again, his voice small, uncertain. "Mama, can he come with us?" Zainab looked down at him, caught off guard. "Why?" she asked gently. Yusuf shrugged slightly, his eyes still fixed on Ibrahim. "I just want to know him." The simplicity of the statement broke something inside her. Because children didn't complicate things the way adults did. They didn't carry pride or fear or years of disappointment. They just wanted connection, truth, belonging. Zainab closed her eyes briefly, taking a slow breath as she tried to steady herself. When she opened them again, she looked at Ibrahim. "Fine," she said quietly. "You can come." Relief flickered across his face, but he didn't show it fully. Because he knew this was not forgiveness. It was not trust. It was simply an opening. The walk to Zainab's home was longer than Ibrahim expected, not because of the distance, but because of what it revealed. The streets grew narrower as they moved away from the main road. The buildings became more worn, more crowded. Children played barefoot in dusty corners, their laughter echoing despite the conditions around them. Vendors sold food from makeshift stands. Women carried heavy loads on their heads. Men sat in small groups discussing life in low voices. This was a part of the city Ibrahim had once known. But now seeing it again through different eyes, it felt heavier, more real, more unforgiving. He glanced at Zainab as they walked. She moved with quiet familiarity, navigating the uneven paths with ease, as if this environment, this struggle had become second nature to her. And Yusuf, he walked beside her occasionally, glancing up at Ibrahim with curiosity that had not yet turned into trust. They reached a small compound tucked between two larger buildings. The entrance was narrow, the walls cracked, the paint long faded. "This is where we stay," Zainab said simply. No apology, no explanation, just truth. Ibrahim nodded slowly, taking it in. Inside the space was modest, a single room, a thin mattress on the floor, a small table with a few items neatly arranged, plates, a kettle, a worn-out fan that barely worked. It was not much, but it was clean, organized, lived in. Zainab set down the small bag she had been carrying and turned to Yusuf. "Go wash your hands," she said gently. "I'll prepare something." Yusuf nodded and disappeared into the small corner that served as a washing area. Ibrahim remained near the doorway, unsure whether to step fully inside or stay where he was. Zainab noticed. "You can come in," she said, her tone neutral. He stepped forward slowly, careful not to disturb anything. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The silence wasn't empty. It was full of everything they hadn't said yet. Finally, Ibrahim broke it. "You did all this alone," he said quietly. Zainab didn't look at him. "I didn't have a choice. You could have come back to my family sooner," he suggested carefully. That made her turn. Her eyes met his, sharp, direct. "I did," she said. The words hit him harder than he expected. "They didn't believe me," she continued. "They said I was lying, that I was trying to trap your name. They turned me away, just like today." Ibrahim's jaw tightened. He had seen it. He had heard it, but hearing it from her made it worse. "I'm sorry," he said. Zainab let out a soft breath. "I'm not looking for your apology," she replied. "Then what are you looking for?" She hesitated. "Because the answer was complicated. I want peace," she said finally, "for myself, for my son." Ibrahim nodded slowly. "And if I'm part of that?" he asked. Zainab looked at him for a long moment, then shook her head slightly. "That depends on you," she said. "Not on promises, not on words, on actions, consistent, proven, real." Yusuf returned then, drying his hands on a small cloth. He looked between them, sensing the shift in the room. "Are you staying?" he asked Ibrahim. Ibrahim crouched slightly, meeting his eyes. "For a little while," he said. Yusuf nodded as if that was enough for now. Zainab moved toward the small cooking area, preparing something simple: rice and a thin stew. The smell filled the room, warm despite its simplicity. Ibrahim watched quietly. Everything about this space told a story. Not of failure, but of survival, strength, sacrifice. And he realized something then. Zainab had not been waiting for him all these years. She had been surviving him, surviving his absence, surviving the life he had unknowingly left her to face alone. And Yusuf. He was not just a possibility anymore. He was real, present, looking at him now, waiting for something Ibrahim had not yet proven he could give. A father. Ibrahim straightened slowly, his mind settling into something clearer than before. This was no longer about doubt, or confusion, or hesitation. This was about truth and responsibility. "I'll arrange for the test," he said, his voice calm but firm. Zainab nodded without turning. "Do what you need to do." A pause. Then Ibrahim added, "But regardless of the result." Zainab stopped moving. "I'm not walking away again." She didn't respond immediately, but something in her posture shifted. Not fully, not completely, but enough. Because deep down, despite everything, a small part of her still remembered the boy who once stood under a mango tree and promised her a future. And for the first time in years, that memory didn't feel entirely broken. That night, sleep did not come easily to any of them. The small room held 3 people now, but it carried years of silence between 2 of them. Ibrahim lay on a thin mat near the door, staring at the cracked ceiling as the faint hum of the broken fan struggled against the heavy air. Every sound, the distant barking of dogs, the murmur of voices outside Yusuf's soft breathing, felt louder than usual, because his mind would not rest. Across the room, Zainab lay beside Yusuf, one arm protectively draped over him, even in sleep, or at least, what looked like sleep. Her eyes had closed hours ago, but her breathing had never fully settled. She was used to being alert, used to waking at the smallest disturbance, used to living in a world where safety was never guaranteed. And Ibrahim, he had been gone through all of it. That truth settled deeper into him with every passing minute. Zainab's life had never been easy, but after she left her aunt's house, it became something else entirely. Something harsher. Something relentless. At first, she tried to stay close to familiar areas, places where people at least recognized her face, even if they did not offer kindness. She found temporary work cleaning small shops, washing clothes for families who paid little and complained often. Some days she worked from sunrise to nightfall and still returned with barely enough to eat. But she endured, because she had to. Pregnancy did not slow her down. It couldn't. There was no one else to carry the burden. As her stomach grew, so did the whispers. "Look at her. No husband. Another girl who couldn't keep her legs closed. She deserves it." The words followed her everywhere. Like shadows she could not escape. But Zainab never responded. Not because it didn't hurt, but because responding would not change anything. She saved her strength for survival. When Yusuf was born, the world did not suddenly become kinder. There were no celebrations, no support, no family gathered around her with joy. Just a small room in a clinic, a tired nurse, and a quiet cry that filled the silence. Zainab held him close, her body weak, her spirit stretched thin, but her heart found something new. Purpose. I will not fail you, she whispered to him that night, even if everything else had failed her. The early years were the hardest. Yusuf cried often, not because he was difficult, but because hunger does not understand patience. There were nights Zainab had nothing to give him but water and whispered comfort. She learned quickly how to stretch a meal, how to find work with a baby tied to her back, how to ignore the looks, the judgment, the constant reminder that she was alone. But she also learned something else: strength, the kind that does not come from choice, but from necessity. Back in the present, Ibrahim turned slightly, his gaze drifting toward Yusuf. Even in sleep, the boy's face carried traces of struggle, but also innocence that had somehow survived it. He had grown up without knowing him, without feeling his presence, without hearing his voice. And yet, he had still called him Daddy. That alone was enough to break something inside Ibrahim. He sat up slowly, careful not to make noise. He needed air, needed space to think. Stepping outside, he leaned against the wall of the small compound, the night sky stretching above him. It was not the skyline of America, no bright lights, no towering buildings, just darkness and stars. The same stars he used to look at years ago, back when everything was simpler, back when promises felt easier to keep. Ibrahim. The voice came softly from behind him. He turned. Zainab stood at the doorway, her arms folded loosely, her expression unreadable in the dim light. "You're not sleeping," she said. "Neither are you." A pause. Then she stepped outside, closing the door, quietly, behind her. For a moment, they stood there in silence, two people who once knew everything about each other, now unsure where to begin. "You heard him," Ibrahim said finally. "When he called me." Zainab nodded. "He's been asking about you for years." The words settled heavily between them. "What did you tell him?" Ibrahim asked. "The truth," she replied. "That his father left to build a better life." A pause. "And that he didn't come back," Ibrahim added quietly. Zainab looked at him. "I told him you would," she said. The honesty caught him off guard. "You still believed that he asked?" She didn't answer immediately. "Then I needed to," she said. Not for herself, for Yusuf, because a child deserved hope, even if it was fragile. "I'm sorry," Ibrahim said again. This time the words carried more weight, more understanding. Zainab exhaled slowly. "I don't need you to say that anymore," she said. "What's done is done." "Then what do you need?" he asked. She looked away briefly, her gaze drifting toward the dark street beyond the compound. "Stability," she said. "For Yusuf. A future that doesn't look like this." Ibrahim nodded. "That's something I can give." Zainab's lips pressed together. "Money isn't everything," she replied. "I know," he said, "but it's a start." Another pause. Then Zainab asked the question that had been sitting quietly in her mind since he appeared. "Why did you come back now?" Ibrahim looked up at the sky for a moment before answering. "Because I thought I had everything," he said. "And then I realized I didn't have anything that mattered." Zainab studied him, trying to decide if those words meant something or if they were just too late. "And what happens when you leave again?" she asked. "I'm not leaving," he said. "You said that before." The reminder stung, but this time, Ibrahim didn't look away. "I know," he admitted. "And I failed you." Zainab's expression softened just slightly. Not forgiveness, but acknowledgement. And now she asked. Now Ibrahim said, his voice steady. "I stay. I fix what I can, and I earn what I don't deserve yet. Zainab held his gaze for a long moment, then nodded, not in agreement, but in acceptance of the moment. We'll see, she said, and that was enough, for now. The next morning came early. Life didn't pause for emotional revelations. Zainab woke before sunrise, as she always did. She prepared Yusuf for the day, packing a small portion of food, adjusting his worn clothes carefully. Ibrahim watched quietly. Every movement, every detail. This was the life he had missed, the routine, the responsibility, the quiet sacrifices no one saw. "Where is he going?" Ibrahim asked. "School," Zainab replied. "You can afford that. I make it work." He nodded slowly. "Then after a moment I'll take him today." Zainab looked at him surprised. "You don't even know where it is. Then you can show me." A pause. Then Yusuf spoke, his face lighting up slightly. "Can he really come?" Zainab hesitated, then nodded. All right. It was a small step, but it meant something. As they stepped out together, Ibrahim walked beside Yusuf, the boy glancing up at him occasionally, curiosity still outweighing everything else. "What do you do?" Yusuf asked. Ibrahim smiled faintly. "I build things, like houses, something like that." Yusuf nodded satisfied. Then after a moment, "Will you stay this time?" The question hit deeper than anything else. Ibrahim looked down at him, and for the first time, he answered without hesitation. "Yes," he said, and this time, he meant it. The clinic smelled faintly of antiseptic and quiet anticipation. It was not one of the large private hospitals Ibrahim was used to in America. No polished marble floors, no glass walls, no receptionists in tailored uniforms. This place was modest, functional, and slightly worn, much like everything else in Zainab's world. But today, it held something more important than comfort. It held the truth. Ibrahim sat in a narrow waiting chair, his elbows resting on his knees, fingers clasped tightly together. Across from him, Yusuf swung his legs gently, too young to fully understand the weight of why they were there, but aware enough to feel the tension in the air. Zainab stood by the window, her arms folded, her eyes fixed outside, as if watching the street would keep her grounded. None of them spoke much on the way there. There were no arguments, no accusations, just silence. Because they all knew this moment would change everything. The decision to take the DNA test had come quickly after that morning walk. Not because Zainab needed proof. She didn't. She had lived that truth every single day. But Ibrahim needed it. Not just for himself, for Yusuf, for the future. "I want there to be no doubt," he had said. Zainab had nodded. Then let there be no doubt. And now, here they were, waiting. A nurse stepped into the room, holding a clipboard. "Ibrahim Musa," she called. He stood immediately. "That's me. Please come this way." He glanced at Zainab. She didn't move. "Go," she said quietly. "I'll be here." Ibrahim nodded and followed the nurse down a short hallway. The procedure itself was simple. A swab, a sample, a few questions. But the simplicity of it did nothing to ease the storm building inside him. Because this was not just about biology. It was about responsibility, identity, everything he had missed, everything he might still have a chance to reclaim. When he returned, Yusuf looked up at him immediately. "Is it done?" the boy asked. Ibrahim managed a small smile. "Yes." "When will we know?" Yusuf continued. "Soon," Ibrahim replied. Yusuf nodded, accepting the answer easily, as children often do. But Zainab, she understood what soon really meant. Time, more waiting, more uncertainty, and she was tired of both. Hours passed, slowly, painfully. The clinic moved on around them. Patients coming and going, nurses walking past, the quiet rhythm of everyday life continuing as if nothing significant was happening. But for Ibrahim, time felt suspended. Every second stretched. Every thought returned to the same question. What if he was wrong? What if this child, this boy, who looked at him with curiosity and something deeper was not his? And what if he was? Which outcome scared him more? He wasn't sure. Finally, the nurse returned. This time her expression was more serious. "Ibrahim Musa," she said. "The results are ready." The air shifted. Zainab turned from the window. Yusuf stopped moving. Ibrahim stood slowly, his legs feeling heavier than before. "Can we all come?" he asked. The nurse nodded. "Yes." They followed her into a small consultation room. A single desk, 3 chairs, a folder resting on the surface. The doctor inside looked up as they entered, his expression professional, but not unkind. "Please sit," he said. They did. Zainab beside Yusuf, Ibrahim across from them. The distance between them suddenly felt smaller, and yet, everything still hung in the balance. The doctor opened the folder, glancing at the documents inside before looking up at Ibrahim. "We've completed the analysis," he said. A pause. Then, "The results are conclusive." Ibrahim's heart pounded. Zainab's hands tightened around Yusuf's. The doctor continued. "There is a 99.9% probability that you are the biological father of this child." Silence. Complete. Overwhelming. Yusuf looked between them, confused. "What does that mean?" he asked softly. But no one answered immediately. Because for Ibrahim, the world had just shifted. Again. Only this time. There was no uncertainty left. He looked at Yusuf. Really looked. And now, there was no distance, no doubt, no question. That was his son, his blood, his responsibility, his family. Ibrahim exhaled slowly, running a hand over his face as the weight of the truth settled fully into him. "I have a son," he said quietly. Not as a question, not as disbelief, as fact. Zainab didn't speak. She didn't need to. This was not new to her. This was not a revelation. It was confirmation of a reality she had carried alone for years. Yusuf looked up at Ibrahim again. "So, you're really my father?" he asked. Ibrahim met his gaze. This time there was no hesitation. "Yes," he said. The word was simple, but it carried everything. Yusuf blinked, processing it. Then slowly, a small smile appeared. Not big, not overwhelming, just enough. Because even after everything, children find hope in the simplest truths. Outside the clinic, the air felt different, lighter and heavier at the same time. Ibrahim stood still for a moment, looking at the world around him as if seeing it clearly for the first time. Nothing had changed, and yet, everything had. Zainab stepped beside him, her expression calm but distant. "Well," she said quietly. "Now you know." Ibrahim nodded. "Yes." A pause. "And what happens now?" she asked. The question was not emotional, not dramatic, just real. Because knowing the truth was one thing. Living with it was another. Ibrahim turned to her. "I take responsibility," he said. Zainab studied him. "Responsibility how?" In every way, he replied. "Be specific," she said. Because vague promises had no value anymore. Ibrahim took a breath. "I provide for him," he said. "Education, stability, a better life." Zainab's expression didn't change. "And I'm present," he added. "I don't disappear again." Another pause, and Ibrahim hesitated, because he knew what she was really asking. "Do you expect me to forgive you?" she said quietly. He shook his head. "No." "Do you expect us to just become a family overnight?" No. "Then what do you expect?" Ibrahim looked at her, then at Yusuf, and finally, he answered, "I expect to earn my place." Zainab held his gaze, searching, measuring, deciding. Finally, she nodded once. "Good," she said. because anything less would not be enough. Yusuf tugged at Ibrahim's sleeve. "Can we get something to eat?" he asked. The normalcy of the question broke the tension slightly. Ibrahim smiled faintly. "Of course." As they began to walk, Yusuf naturally moved closer to him, not fully, not completely, but enough to show something was changing. Not trust, not yet, but curiosity, connection, the beginning of something. Zainab watched them quietly. Her heart pulled in two directions. One part of her wanted to protect the life she had built, fragile but stable. The other part could not ignore what was happening. Because no matter how much she tried to separate the past from the present, Ibrahim was now part of their future. Not as a memory, not as a regret, but as reality, and reality could not be ignored. As they walked down the street together, three figures moving side by side, something subtle shifted in the space between them. Not resolution, not healing, but possibility. And sometimes, that was where everything began. By the third day after the DNA result, Ibrahim understood something with painful clarity. Truth did not automatically create peace. It only exposed what had been hidden. And now that the truth was out, the next battle was not about whether Yusuf was his son. That had been settled. The next battle was about what the Musa family would do when they found out Ibrahim had returned, and that the woman they had humiliated at their gate had been telling the truth all along. Ibrahim had not gone back to the estate yet, not because he was afraid, but because he wanted to move carefully. He wanted to understand the ground beneath his feet before stepping into war, and war, he knew, was exactly what was waiting for him. That afternoon, he sat in Zainab's small room, his phone in his hand, staring at a flood of unread messages from business associates, assistants, and people who had been trying to reach him since his arrival in Nigeria. He had switched the device back on only hours ago, and already the world he had built in America was demanding his attention. Board meetings, investment calls, a luxury hotel project in Abuja, a property acquisition in Lagos, a charity gala his team had already publicized in his name. The life of Ibrahim Musa, billionaire businessman, had continued moving exactly as expected. But the life that mattered most to him, was this one. A thin room, a quiet woman cooking at the corner stove. A little boy, bent over a school book, lips moving as he tried to sound out the words. Yusuf frowned at a line of text, then looked up. "Is this right?" he asked. Ibrahim leaned over, read it again. Yusuf tried once more, slower this time. His voice was uneven but determined. When he finished, he looked at Ibrahim with that familiar seriousness children carried when they wanted approval, but pretended not to. "That was better," Ibrahim said gently. "You're learning fast." Yusuf's face brightened, and for a brief second he smiled without caution. It hit Ibrahim harder than he expected. 7 years. 7 years of missing moments like this. The first tooth, the first fever, the first day of school, the first question about why other children had fathers present and he did not. He had lost all of it, and there was no fortune in the world that could buy back those years. Zainab placed a metal cup of water on the table near him without speaking. Her movements were calm, practical, controlled. That was how she had been since the clinic. Not cruel, not warm, just careful. She no longer argued with him the way she had that first day. But she did not soften either. Every word between them felt measured, as though she was constantly checking whether reality matched what he claimed. Ibrahim did not blame her. Trust once broken deeply enough did not return because of apologies. It returned because of repetition, consistency, presence, and even then, sometimes it never returned fully. A knock sounded at the door. Zainab stiffened slightly. Ibrahim noticed it. "Who is it?" she asked. Auntie Halima, came the voice from outside. Zainab moved quickly to open the door. A middle-aged woman with tired eyes and a scarf tied neatly over her hair stepped in. She carried a small plastic bowl and the alert expression of someone who always noticed more than she said. Halima lived 2 doors down, and from what Ibrahim had gathered, had been one of the few people who had shown Zainab consistent kindness over the years. She sometimes watched Yusuf when Zainab worked late, sometimes brought stew, sometimes simply sat in silence when life became too heavy. Her eyes landed on Ibrahim almost immediately. So this was not going to be a quiet visit. "You are still here," Halima said, not hiding her surprise. "I am Ibrahim," replied respectfully, rising to greet her. Halima looked from him to Zainab and back again. Then she handed the bowl to Zainab. "I brought beans." "Thank you," Zainab said softly. Halima lowered herself onto the edge of the chair and kept her attention on Ibrahim. Men who disappear usually do not come back to sit in poor rooms. The bluntness would have offended many people. Ibrahim found that it only made him respect her. "I deserve that," he said. Halima's eyebrows lifted slightly as if she had expected deflection, not honesty. Yusuf looked up from his book. "He is my father," he announced with the strange pride of a child who had finally learned something important and wanted the world to recognize it. Halima's expression changed. Not shock exactly. More like the quiet satisfaction of someone whose suspicions had long been confirmed. "I always knew that boy came from somewhere," she said. Zainab looked down embarrassed, but Halima wasn't done. "You need to know something," she said to Ibrahim, her tone growing heavier. "Your family is preparing something big." Ibrahim straightened. "What do you mean?" "They have been talking," Halima said. "Everyone in this area has heard it by now. Your mother has been telling people you are returning soon. There will be a welcome gathering at the estate this weekend." Ibrahim said nothing. Halima continued. "They say she wants to announce your engagement." The room fell silent. Even Yusuf, who did not fully understand, sensed the change in the air and stopped moving. Ibrahim's face hardened slowly. "Engagement to who?" Aisha Bello, Halima replied. "Daughter of Alhaji Bello from Kaduna. Rich family, powerful connections. People say the match has been discussed for years." Zainab turned sharply toward Ibrahim, but whatever passed across her face was gone almost as quickly as it came. He saw it anyway. That tiny flicker. Not surprise. Not exactly. More like confirmation of an old wound. Of course, she would think this was another betrayal waiting to happen. "That's not happening," Ibrahim said flatly. Halima gave a small shrug. "Your mother seems to think it is." When she left a few minutes later, the room remained thick with silence. Ibrahim stood near the doorway, jaw tight, one hand braced against the wall. The old anger, the anger he had spent years channeling into ambition, discipline, business, rose again, only now it was personal in a different way. His mother had stood at that gate and denied his son, and now, without even knowing he was already in the city, she was preparing to parade him into a wealthy marriage alliance, as if his life were still a family asset to be negotiated. Zainab returned to stirring the pot, but there was less steadiness in her movements now. "Aisha Bello," she said after a while, her voice almost too neutral. "So that was the plan." Ibrahim turned. "There is no plan." She gave a small, humorless laugh. "There is always a plan with families like yours. You think I knew about this?" "No," she said. "I think your mother knew exactly what she was doing." Her words hung in the air, and they were true. Hajia Amina had always seen marriage as strategy, alignment, image, influence. She would never have considered Zainab a worthy choice, not even if Ibrahim had returned years ago with empty pockets and a stubborn heart. And now that he was rich, the stakes were even higher. She will use that party to control the narrative, Ibrahim said quietly, more to himself than to anyone else. Zainab looked at him. What narrative that I came home successful, that the family stands strong, that nothing outside their version of the truth exists. And me? Zainab asked. The question was soft, but it carried everything. Ibrahim met her gaze. You are the truth they tried to bury. A pause. Then he added firmer now, and Yusuf is living proof. Yusuf looked between them, confused again by the seriousness in their voices. What is an engagement, he asked. Neither adult answered immediately. Then Ibrahim crouched beside him. It means adults sometimes make promises about marriage, he said carefully. Yusuf frowned. Like when you promised Mama, the question struck like a blade. Zainab stopped moving. Ibrahim swallowed hard. Yes, he said quietly. Like that. Yusuf considered this. Then don't promise somebody else. The simplicity of it made Zainab turn away, blinking quickly as if something had caught in her eye. Ibrahim stayed very still. Then slowly, something settled inside him. Not confusion, not grief, but decision. He rose to his feet. I'm going to the estate tonight, he said. Zainab looked at him sharply. Alone. Yes, that's a mistake. No, Ibrahim replied, his voice calm but immovable. The mistake was waiting this long. He reached for his car keys on the table. Zainab stepped closer, lowering her voice. Your mother will deny everything. Then let her. She will insult me again. A beat. She will not touch you this time, Ibrahim said. Zainab searched his face, measuring the certainty there. And if she tries to hide behind status, behind the family name? Ibrahim's expression changed, then cold, focused unmistakably, the man who had built an empire out of rejection. Then she is about to learn. He said that my name no longer belongs to her plans. Outside, evening was beginning to settle over the neighborhood. Inside, the room felt too small for what was coming next, because this was no longer just a secret reunion, no longer just a private reckoning between lost lovers and a forgotten child. This was about to become public, and when the Musa family's carefully polished world collided with the truth of Zainab and Yusuf, someone's pride was going to break. Maybe several people's. Ibrahim glanced once more at Yusuf, then at Zainab. Whatever happens next, he said, I will not let them erase you again. This time Zainab did not reply, but she didn't look away either. And as Ibrahim stepped out into the darkening street, one thing became painfully clear. The real battle had not started at the gate. It was only beginning now. By the time Ibrahim's car turned into the long private road leading to the Musa estate, night had already settled over Kano like a heavy silk cloth. The city lights flickered in the distance, but here inside the high walls of old wealth, everything was more controlled, more polished, more deliberate. Nothing had changed, and yet for Ibrahim, everything had. The estate gates opened after only a brief pause. The guards who had ignored him days earlier now stiffened the moment the headlights illuminated his face clearly. Recognition spread across them like a sudden electric current. But Ibrahim did not slow down for their surprise. He drove in, straight, silent. Purpose in every movement. The front of the house glowed with warm golden lights. Cars were already lined up neatly near the entrance. Several staff moved quickly through the courtyard, carrying trays, adjusting flowers, preparing lanterns, polishing silver. It was obvious now Halima had not exaggerated. This was no small family gathering. This was a performance. And Ibrahim's mother was directing it. He stepped out of the car, wearing a dark, tailored suit, simple but unmistakably expensive, the kind of elegance that did not need introduction. A few workers stopped mid-step the moment they saw him. One nearly dropped a tray. Malam Ibrahim. The title followed him like a wave as he moved toward the front steps. Inside the grand foyer, the familiar scent of polished wood perfume and old pride hit him immediately. The marble floor reflected chandeliers overhead. Family portraits lined the walls, faces frozen in wealth tradition and controlled legacy. A servant hurried off to announce his arrival, but Ibrahim had no interest in waiting. He walked deeper into the house. And just like that, the years between then and now seemed to fold into each other. His childhood, the quiet pressure to be exceptional, the lessons about family honor, the conversations where love had always been measured against usefulness. The room ahead was alive with voices when he entered. His mother stood near the center, surrounded by women in elegant wrappers and men in richly embroidered agbadas. Laughter drifted through the space. Glasses clinked softly. At a distance, musicians were testing instruments for the coming celebration. And beside Hajia Amina stood a young woman dressed in expensive, modest fashion, graceful and poised with the composed beauty of someone raised to understand exactly what rooms like this expected from her. Aisha Bello, so it was true. The moment Ibrahim entered, the laughter faded, then stopped. Heads turned one by one until the entire room was facing him. His mother froze, only for a second. Then her face transformed, not with guilt, not with alarm, but with practiced delight. "Ibrahim," she said, pressing one hand dramatically to her chest as she moved toward him. "You came without warning." Her voice was warm enough for the room, but he knew her too well. Warmth was often the first layer of control. He bent slightly in greeting, respectful in form if not in spirit. "I thought a surprise return would be appropriate." "It is more than appropriate," she said, taking his hand. "It is a blessing." The people around them began to recover from the initial shock. Murmurs rose, smiles appeared. Men approached to greet him. Women admired how well he looked. Names and compliments floated around him, but Ibrahim barely heard any of it, because he was watching his mother, and she was watching him, right back, carefully, measuring, trying to determine how much he knew. Aisha stepped forward when prompted. "Welcome home, Ibrahim." Her smile was elegant, controlled, and slightly uncertain. Perhaps she had heard of him for years. Perhaps she had imagined this meeting differently. Perhaps she had no idea she was standing in the middle of a lie she did not create. "Thank you," Ibrahim said politely. "Nothing more." Hajia Amina noticed. "Of course she did. We were just discussing this weekend's celebration," she said brightly. "Your return has come at the perfect time. Has it?" Ibrahim asked. The faintest shift passed across her expression. "Yes," she replied smoothly. "There are many people eager to honor what you have become, what I have become, not who I am. Never that." One of his uncles clapped him on the shoulder. "You've made the Musa name proud, son. America has treated you well." Ibrahim gave a faint smile, but inside something cold continued to sharpen. Pride, status, legacy. That was the language of this house, the language that had pushed Zainab outside the gate like shame itself. "Can we speak privately?" Ibrahim asked his mother. The room quieted again. Hajia Amina did not hesitate long. Of course. She led him to her private sitting room, a smaller chamber lined with carved furniture and shelves of carefully chosen books no one actually read. As soon as the door closed behind them, the smile disappeared from her face. There it was, the real room, the real conversation. "You came back quietly," she said, turning to face him, while Ibrahim slipped his hands into his pockets and held her gaze. "I wanted to see things as they were. And what exactly do you think you saw?" He did not answer immediately. He wanted her to sit in the question, to feel the silence. Finally he said, "A woman and a child at the gate." That was enough. Her jaw tightened. "I see," she said softly. "No," Ibrahim replied. "You don't." She lifted her chin. "That woman is a problem that should have ended years ago." The words hit him harder than he expected, though he had already heard enough to know where her heart stood. "A problem," he repeated. "Yes," she said. "A manipulative girl who appeared with a child and a story when you were no longer here to deny it." Ibrahim's eyes darkened. Deny it. She had no proof. She does now. The words landed between them like a blow. For the first time, his mother's face changed. Not dramatically, but enough. "What are you saying?" "I am saying," Ibrahim replied, his voice level and dangerously calm, "that Yusuf is my son." Silence. Absolute. His mother stared at him, perhaps waiting for some sign that this was emotion speaking, not fact. "You cannot know that." "I do know that," Ibrahim said. There was a test. Her fingers tightened around the edge of a chair. "And you believed her so easily." "I didn't believe her easily," he snapped for the first time. "I believed the truth when I saw it. And I confirmed it." She turned away for a moment, collecting herself. When she spoke again, her voice was cooler. "Even if that child is yours, it changes nothing." Ibrahim almost laughed, but there was no humor in him. "It changes everything." "No," she said sharply, turning back to him. "It changes nothing that matters." He stepped closer. "What matters to you, mother?" She didn't flinch. "Your future, this family's reputation, stability, and Zainab, she is not my concern." The sentence sliced through the room. Ibrahim looked at her in disbelief, not because he thought she was incapable of cruelty, but because hearing it said so plainly removed all remaining illusions. "She carried my child alone. She made her choice. I made promises to her. And then life moved on," Hajia Amina replied. "As it does. Men of purpose do not destroy themselves over youthful mistakes." "Mistakes?" He stared at her. "You think she was a mistake?" "I think," his mother said slowly, "that poor girls learn quickly how to hold on to powerful names." The insult landed exactly where she intended. But Ibrahim was no longer the young man who argued emotionally and lost ground because his heart showed first. Now he understood. Leverage. And truth. "You're hosting a celebration for my return," he said. She narrowed her eyes slightly. "Yes, you're presenting Aisha Bello as my future. She is suitable. I am not marrying Aisha." His mother inhaled slowly, carefully. "That is not a decision you make in anger. It is a decision I make in truth. And what truth is that? That I already have a family." The words seemed to echo in the room. A wife would have shocked her less, because wives could be negotiated, chosen, introduced. But family suggested bond, obligation, blood, public consequence. "You cannot bring that woman into this house," Hajia Amina said, her voice lower, now more dangerous. "Do you understand what people will say?" Ibrahim's expression did not change. "Yes," he said. "They will say that while I was gone, my family rejected my son." She took a step closer. "Then keep them away. Provide for them quietly if you must. But do not humiliate us. Us." There it was again, the family as a polished object more sacred than the people crushed beneath it. Ibrahim's voice became very still. "Do you hear yourself? I hear myself clearly. Then hear me clearly too." He stepped close enough now that there was no softening what came next. "You shut the gate on my child." Her eyes flashed. "I protected this family. You protected your pride. I protected your future." "No," he said. "You rewrote it." A knock sounded at the door. Before she could answer, a servant's nervous voice came through the wood. "Hajia, the guests are asking for Malam Ibrahim." The room went silent again. His mother looked at him, and for the first time there was something almost like warning in her expression. "If you disgrace this family tonight," she said quietly, "you will regret it." Ibrahim moved toward the door, then stopped and looked back. "I already regret enough." Then he opened the door and walked out, back into the bright hall, back into the waiting faces, back into the celebration that had been prepared as a coronation, but was about to become something else entirely. Because now he knew exactly what his mother wanted, and more importantly, he knew what he would not allow. When Ibrahim stepped back into the grand hall, the music had resumed, but only barely. The room was pretending nothing had shifted, pretending the pause in conversation was natural, pretending the tension in Hajia Amina's face was not there. But Ibrahim could feel it everywhere now, hanging in the air like the moment before a storm finally breaks. Guests turned toward him with bright, curious smiles. Men adjusted their robes. Women lifted their glasses. Somewhere in the corner, a servant whispered instructions to another servant, both of them glancing nervously in Ibrahim's direction. Aisha Bello stood near the center of the room, poised beside a floral arrangement, as though she had already been placed there for a formal unveiling. Her expression was graceful, but not relaxed. She had sensed enough to know that something had gone wrong. An uncle approached Ibrahim with an exaggerated grin. "Come," he said. "Everyone wants to hear from the man of the hour." The man of the hour. Ibrahim almost found the phrase ironic, because this was supposed to be his mother's hour, her performance, her carefully arranged social victory. Her son returned from America, richer than anyone had imagined, ready to strengthen the family's standing with a perfect alliance. Instead, Ibrahim walked to the center of the hall and felt nothing but clarity. A servant handed him a glass of juice. He took it, set it down untouched on a nearby table, and slowly turned to face the room. The murmurs softened, then disappeared. Hajia Amina moved closer, her smile composed and practiced. "My son has finally returned to us," she said, lifting her voice so the room could hear. "And before the weekend celebration, we wanted to welcome him among those who matter most to this family." There was a warm ripple of approval. Then she continued, "It is a season of joy and, by God's grace, a season of new beginnings." A few guests glanced toward Aisha, so that was how she meant to do it. Not all at once, not crudely, with suggestion first, familiarity, social momentum. Let the room understand before anyone formally announced it. Ibrahim saw the strategy and ended it. "I agree," he said. His voice was calm, carrying easily across the room. "It is a season of truth." The temperature of the room seemed to change instantly. His mother's smile held for 1 second too long, then tightened almost invisibly. Some guests shifted. An older woman lowered her glass. Aisha's hands came together lightly in front of her, the posture of someone suddenly unsure, whether she was part of the moment or trapped inside it. Ibrahim continued, "I left this country years ago with a dream and a promise. The dream was mine. But the promise," he paused, "the promise belonged to someone else too. Nobody moved, nobody interrupted. That was the power Ibrahim carried. Now not just wealth but presence. When he chose to own a room, it became his. I built a life abroad," he said. "I worked, I fought, I succeeded. People will say I have returned home as a man who made the Musa family proud." A few guests nodded automatically. "But pride," Ibrahim said, "is a dangerous thing when it asks us to forget who we hurt on the way to protecting it." This time no one nodded. Across the room, Hajia Amina's face became still. Not emotional. Still. The expression of a woman calculating damage. One of his older cousins laughed weakly, trying to lighten the atmosphere. "Ibrahim, you're speaking like a preacher tonight." But Ibrahim did not even turn toward him. Instead, he looked directly at Aisha Bello, then at her father, then at the rest of the room. "So, let me save everyone the embarrassment of assumptions," he said. "I am not here to announce an engagement." Silence. This time it was immediate and absolute. Aisha's eyes widened, not dramatically, but enough. Al-Haji Bello's jaw tightened, and Hajia Amina took one controlled step forward. "Ibrahim," she said, smiling with her mouth and nothing else. Perhaps this is not the time, for it is exactly the time he cut in. The interruption itself sent a quiet shock through the room. Sons like Ibrahim were not supposed to cut across mothers like Amina in public, not in a hall full of elders and power brokers and family names that survived on appearances. But Ibrahim no longer belonged to the rules that had once silenced him. He belonged to the truth now, and truth had no respect for polished lies. He turned his gaze to the crowd again. "There is a woman," he said, his voice lower, now more personal, more dangerous because of its calm. "A woman who came to this house more than once asking for nothing but recognition, not money, not favors, just recognition." No one breathed. She was pushed away, Ibrahim continued. Insulted, humiliated, treated like a threat. His mother's voice sharpened. Enough. He ignored her. "And there is a child," he said. "My child." The room seemed to tilt. A woman near the back gasped softly. Someone dropped a spoon onto a tray. Aisha Bello went completely still. Alhaji Bello's expression changed from irritation to cold offense, as though he had suddenly realized this was not merely a family disagreement, but a public insult to an alliance he had taken seriously. But Ibrahim did not stop. "I have a son," he said. "His name is Yusuf. And while I was gone, he was denied at the gate of this house by people who should have protected him." The weight of the words settled like falling stone. This was not rumor anymore, not whisper, not accusation spoken in private rooms. This was declaration. Public, irreversible. Hajia Amina stepped toward him, every trace of performance gone now. "You will not do this here." Ibrahim turned to her for the first time since he began. "I already am. You are being manipulated." "No," he said. "I was being kept blind." He pulled a folded document from the inside pocket of his jacket. The DNA results. He held them for a moment, not dramatically, just long enough for the meaning to register, then placed them on the table in front of the nearest cluster of elders. A rustle spread through the room. Men leaned forward. Women exchanged quick looks. Nobody touched the paper at first, but everyone understood what it was. "Proof," Ibrahim said. One of the elders, a man old enough to speak with the authority of age rather than title, stepped closer and adjusted his glasses. He glanced at the page, then looked up slowly. The silence deepened. Because he did not deny it. He did not laugh it away. He simply said, "This appears clear." That was all it took. The room changed again. It was subtle, but Ibrahim felt it. The shift from spectacle to consequence, from surprise to judgment, from gossip to fact. Alhaji Bello's face darkened. He looked at Hajia Amina with open displeasure. "You invited us here without settling this matter." Hajia Amina straightened. "There is nothing to settle in public." "There is now," he replied coldly. Aisha lowered her eyes, a quiet flush of humiliation rising beneath her composed exterior. She had done nothing wrong, and now everyone in the room knew it. Ibrahim saw that, and despite everything felt for her. This was not her sin. She was simply another person being used by a family that valued position over truth. "I apologize to you," Aisha, Ibrahim said, his tone sincere. "You should never have been placed in this situation." She looked at him, then surprised by the directness, and perhaps by the respect. She gave the faintest nod, but said nothing. Hajia Amina's voice cut through the room again. "You are throwing away your future for a woman who waited until you had money to return." That did it. Something fierce and final rose in Ibrahim's expression. "She was poor when I loved her," he said. "She was poor when I left. She was poor when she raised my son alone. And she was still poor when she stood at your gate, asking only for the truth. So do not insult her character just because your conscience cannot survive hers." The words landed hard hard enough that several people looked away, hard enough that even those who agreed with Amina's instincts could not defend her methods anymore. One of Ibrahim's uncles muttered, "This is becoming shameful." Ibrahim turned sharply toward him. It became shameful the day a child was shut out of his father's home. No one answered that, because no one could. A servant appeared hesitantly at the doorway to the hall, eyes lowered clearly, uncertain whether to enter. Ibrahim recognized him as one of the older staff, a man who had been around since Ibrahim's childhood. "Sir," the man said nervously, addressing Ibrahim, There is someone outside." The room froze all over again. Ibrahim did not need to ask who. He knew, because before leaving Zainab's room, he had sent a message through Halima, one simple instruction, in case the moment demanded it. "Come if you hear from me. Bring Yusuf, no matter what." Hajia Amina understood it too. Her face, drained of color for the first time that night. "No," she said sharply. "They are not coming in here." Ibrahim looked at the servant. "Bring them in." The servant hesitated only a second before nodding, and then, as the room held its breath, and the last fragile pieces of the Musa family's carefully polished image began to crack apart, the doors opened. When the doors opened, it did not happen with the dramatic force people often imagine in stories. There was no thunder, no music stopping at the perfect second, no gasp loud enough to carry the full weight of the moment. Instead, it happened quietly, and that quietness made it even more powerful. Zainab stood at the entrance in a faded dress that looked painfully out of place beneath the chandeliers, her posture straight, even though every instinct in her body seemed to be warning her to turn back. Beside her stood Yusuf, small still, his eyes wide as they took in the polished hall, the expensive clothes, the many faces staring at him, as though he had stepped into a world not meant for him. For one long second, no one moved. The contrast was too sharp, too revealing. The wealthy room, the poor woman, the child, and the truth standing between them. Then whispers began, soft at first, then growing. "Is that her? The woman from the story, that child? Look at his face." Because now that Yusuf stood beneath the light with Ibrahim only a few steps away, it became harder to deny what some had not wanted to see. The resemblance was there, not only in the eyes but in the jawline, the quiet way he held himself, when uncertain, the searching seriousness that made him seem older than his years. Zainab's hand tightened around Yusuf's. She had almost refused to come. When Halima arrived breathless at her room with Ibrahim's message, her first instinct had been no. She had already been humiliated at that house, already been dismissed, insulted, turned into a spectacle for the comfort of the powerful. To walk back into that estate, willingly this time, felt like walking into a wound she had barely survived the first time. But Halima had looked at her and said, "If the truth is finally being spoken, don't let other people speak it without your face there." And so she came, not because she trusted the room, not because she trusted the family, but because Yusuf deserved to stand where he had once been rejected and not bow his head this time. At the center of the hall, Ibrahim stepped forward. He did not hesitate. He did not look around for permission. He simply crossed the polished floor until he stood in front of Zainab and Yusuf, and in doing so, he drew a line in the room, clearer than any speech could. He was choosing where to stand, publicly, without ambiguity, without shame. Hajia Amina's voice broke the silence first. "This is unacceptable." Her tone was low, but everyone heard it. She had lost control of the room, and nothing frightened her more than that. The careful layers of image, influence, and authority she had built over years were splitting in public, and she could feel every eye turning not just toward Zainab, but toward her, toward what she had done, toward what she had tried to bury. Ibrahim turned slowly to face his mother. "What is unacceptable," he said, "is pretending they do not belong here." A sharp murmur moved through the guests. Some looked offended by his tone. Others looked relieved. Someone had finally said out loud what they were already thinking. Zainab remained still, but inside her pulse was racing. She could feel eyes moving over her dress, her face, her hands, her shoes, measuring her, comparing her, reducing her. It was a feeling she knew too well. But something was different tonight. For the first time, she was not standing there alone. Yusuf shifted slightly behind her leg. Then, in the innocent way children do when adults are drowning in pride and performance, he looked up at Ibrahim and asked, "Should I greet them?" The question stunned the room. A few women visibly softened. Even one of the older men blinked and looked away, as if the child's simple politeness had exposed the ugliness of the entire evening more brutally than any accusation could. Ibrahim crouched slightly so he could look at Yusuf properly. "Yes," he said gently. "You should. No matter how people behave, you must know who you are." Yusuf nodded, then turned toward the room shy, but trying to be brave. "Good evening," he said softly. That did more damage to the Musa family's pride than any shouting could have. Because he was not rude, he was not wild, he was not some scandalous symbol dragged in for effect. He was a child, a well-mannered, frightened child, and once the room saw that it became much harder to hide behind cruelty. Al-Haji Bello, who had been standing near Aisha, with the rigid posture of a man deeply insulted, spoke at last. "Hajia Amina," he said, each word sharp with restrained anger. "Was this the matter you considered? Too insignificant to mention." Amina lifted her chin. The matter was unresolved. "Unresolved," Al-Haji Bello repeated. "You invited my family into a house preparing an alliance, while your son already has a child being denied at your gate." Aisha lowered her eyes again, her face burning with quiet humiliation. She had entered the evening, expecting a formal beginning. Instead, she had become witness to a moral collapse. "I apologize again," Ibrahim said to her more firmly this time. "You should not have been used in this." Used. That word struck the room differently, because now the pattern was visible. Zainab had been dismissed. Yusuf had been rejected. Aisha had been positioned. Truth itself had been managed like an inconvenience. Hajia Amina's control slipped another inch. "You speak as if you are blameless," she said, turning on Ibrahim. "Where were you all these years? Where was this righteousness when the child was being born, when the woman was struggling? You return now with money and guilt, and suddenly you want to put everything on this family." The attack landed because it carried some truth, and everyone knew it. Zainab felt the words hit Ibrahim like stones, even though his face remained composed. For a moment, the room waited to see what he would do. Defend himself, shift blame, retreat into silence. Instead, Ibrahim did something none of them expected. He nodded. "You are right about one thing," he said. "I failed them too." The admission changed the air again, not because it erased anything, but because honesty does what power can. It unsettles people who are used to control. "I was not there." Ibrahim continued, his voice steady. "I did not know in time. I lost contact. I let life swallow me. And while I was building wealth, Zainab was surviving pain I should have shared. Yusuf was growing without me. That is my shame." He looked at the room. "At least mine is honest." No one moved, no one interrupted, because the force of the sentence lay not in anger, but in its clarity. Then he turned toward Zainab. Every eye followed. What happened next was not dramatic in gesture, but it felt monumental all the same. He stepped closer to her and in full view of everyone said, "I cannot return the years you lost. I cannot erase what this family did to you. I cannot undo the nights you cried alone, or the days you worked until your body broke. But I can do one thing tonight. I can stop pretending you are someone to hide." Zainab's throat tightened. She had survived on stubbornness for so long that tenderness almost felt dangerous now. Especially public tenderness. Especially in a room that had once made her feel smaller than dust. Ibrahim turned and placed one hand gently on Yusuf's shoulder. "This boy," he said, his voice carrying again, "is my son. His name is Yusuf Ibrahim Musa. And no one, no matter how wealthy, how respected, how proud, will ever again treat him like he is outside this family." The declaration landed like a final bell. Irreversible. Public. Total. One of the elders who had earlier examined the DNA document stepped forward. He looked at Yusuf for a long moment, then at Ibrahim. "If this is so," he said slowly, "then the boy must not be denied." It was not a warm endorsement, but it was enough. Because in families like this, acknowledgement from an elder could tilt the weight of an entire room. Another uncle, less pleased, muttered, "This is still disgrace." The elder turned sharply toward him. No, the disgrace was in hiding it. That shifted things further. Guests who had remained neutral began quietly to rearrange themselves inwardly. Not everyone was suddenly kind. Not everyone became just. But the moral center of the room had moved, and people could feel it. Hajia Amina saw it too, and that was when she made the mistake. Pride often makes when cornered. She looked directly at Zainab and said with cold contempt, "Do not think standing here changes what you are." The cruelty of it stunned the hall, not because people did not know she could be harsh, but because even now, even after proof, even after public acknowledgement, even after a child stood there with frightened dignity, she could not stop herself from reducing Zainab to class. Something inside Ibrahim snapped. He stepped between them so completely there could be no question whose side he was on. "What she is," he said, his voice low and cutting, "is the woman who suffered because I was absent and you were heartless. What she is stronger than everyone in this room who judged her from comfort. What she is more honorable than any title that has been used tonight to excuse cruelty." Zainab's eyes filled despite herself, not because the pain vanished, not because she trusted the moment, but because for the first time in years someone with power was not asking her to be quiet in order to protect a lie. Someone was finally naming the wound correctly. Yusuf reached for her hand again, and this time when he looked up at the room, there was less fear in his eyes. Still uncertainty, still caution, but less fear. The room had changed, not healed, not resolved, but changed, because once a hidden child has been called by name before witnesses. Once a humiliated woman has been defended in the house that rejected her. Once the truth has stood in the center of wealth and refused to bow. Nothing can ever go back to the way it was. And everyone in that hall knew it. The hall did not recover after that. It only rearranged its silence. Not the comfortable silence of wealthy people waiting for the next polite conversation to begin, but the uneasy silence that settles when truth has stripped prestige bare and left everyone staring at what remains. The chandeliers still glowed above them. The trays still reflected soft light. The musicians at the edge of the room still held their instruments, awkwardly unsure whether the evening was over or simply broken beyond repair. But something essential had changed. The Musa family was no longer controlling the story, and Hajia Amina felt it more than anyone. She stood near the center of the room, with her shoulders still straight, her wrapper still immaculate, her face still composed in the way only people deeply practiced in pride can manage when humiliation arrives in public. But her eyes had changed. The confidence that came from social dominance had cracked into something colder, more desperate. Because now she was not only facing Ibrahim, she was facing witnesses. Witnesses who had heard him claim his son. Witnesses who had seen the DNA results, witnesses who had watched her continue to insult Zainab even after the truth was undeniable. And in families built on reputation, witnesses were dangerous. One of the older women present a respected widow known for saying little and seeing much. Slowly rose from her seat. She adjusted the edge of her shawl and looked directly at Hajia Amina. "You have made a mistake," she said. The simplicity of the sentence hit harder than a speech. Amina turned toward her. "With respect, this is a family matter." The widow did not sit down. It stopped being only a family matter when you invited half the city to stand inside a lie. A murmur of agreement passed through a few corners of the room. Small, careful, but real. Another elder, a man who had known Ibrahim's late father and had often been treated with ceremonial respect, more than genuine regard, stepped forward with his cane. He did not raise his voice either. The child should have been received privately and investigated with dignity, he said. Not rejected like a nuisance. Hajia Amina's nostrils flared slightly. "And what would you have me do?" "Open the door every time a poor woman appears with a claim." Zainab stiffened, but before Ibrahim could respond, the elder answered first. "No," he said. "But when a woman returns again and again without asking for money, only acknowledgement-wise people ask why." That landed, because that had always been the part hardest to defend. Zainab had not come demanding wealth. She had not sent the story to gossip pages or used public shame as leverage. She had come to the gate again and again asking for truth, and Amina had answered with rejection. Al-Haji Bello, who had remained standing rigidly beside Aisha, finally spoke again. His anger had cooled into something more formal, now offense dressed in dignity. "My daughter will not be discussed in this house again as part of any arrangement," he said. "Whatever relationship our families had in mind ends here." Aisha looked up at that, her face composed but wounded. She was too proud to cry in public, too trained to collapse under humiliation. But the hurt was there. Ibrahim saw it and hated that she had been made collateral damage in a battle she did not create. She met his gaze once and said quietly, "You should have been told the truth sooner, too." It was an unexpectedly generous sentence, and perhaps that was what separated her from the cruelty around her. Not innocence, just integrity. "I'm sorry," Ibrahim said again, meaning it. Aisha gave a slight nod, then turned to leave with her father. Several guests began to understand the social weather immediately. If the Bellos were leaving, then staying too comfortably in the room might now suggest support for the wrong side of a scandal. One by one, greetings became stiffer. Postures changed, alliances recalculated themselves in silence. That was how elite disgrace worked. Rarely with shouting, mostly with distance. Zainab noticed it all, though she wished she didn't. Years of being looked down upon had made her skilled at reading rooms that wanted her invisible. Now for the first time she watched a room redirect its judgment away from her and toward the people who had once stood safely above her. It did not feel triumphant. It felt sad. Because if truth had been allowed to breathe earlier, none of this would have needed to happen. Yusuf pressed closer to her side. The hall was too large, the eyes too many, the tension too thick for a child to fully understand, but impossible not to feel. "Mama," he whispered, "can we go soon?" Zainab bent and touched his cheek. "Soon." Ibrahim heard him and turned slightly. There was pain in his face now, not the raw shock of discovery, but the deeper pain of recognition. Yusuf should never have had to stand in a hall like this, waiting for adults to decide whether he deserved belonging. That thought hardened him again. He faced his mother fully. "This ends tonight," he said. Hajia Amina laughed, once a brittle sound with no warmth in it. "You speak as if you have all the power now." "I do," Ibrahim replied. That silence that followed was different from the others. Because this one was not emotional, it was factual. Everyone in the room knew what he meant. He was no longer the son depending on family access. He was the wealth, the influence. The name carried further now by his success than by the old estate walls around them. If he withdrew from the family publicly, the Musa image would suffer far beyond one evening's embarrassment. Hajia Amina knew it too. Her face tightened. So this is what America taught you? To come back and shame your mother? Ibrahim's answer came without heat, which made it even harder to resist. No. Life taught me what shame actually is. He took a step toward her, not aggressive, just immovable. Shame is a woman raising my child alone while I am absent. Shame is a boy standing at our gate and being treated like dirt. Shame is a family that prefers denial over decency. Amina's voice sharpened. I protected what your father built. You protected your image of it, Ibrahim said. My father may have loved status, but he also knew responsibility. Don't use his memory to excuse what you did. That struck deeper than anyone expected, because the late Musa patriarch, for all his faults, had indeed been known for certain lines he did not cross in public matters of blood and duty. Several elders shifted uncomfortably, perhaps remembering the same thing. The widow spoke again, this time toward Zainab. My daughter, she said gently, you were wronged. The tenderness of it nearly undid Zainab more than the insults had. She had spent years defending herself against contempt. She had not prepared for recognition. Not from rooms like this. Not from mouths that once might have dismissed her without a second glance. She bowed her head slightly. Thank you. The widow nodded, then looked at Yusuf. And the child must not carry this shame. It is not his. Yusuf looked confused by the words, but he understood the kindness in her tone. That was enough. By now more guests were beginning to leave. Not dramatically, quietly. A couple here, an elder there. A family friend murmuring polite goodnights that felt more like strategic retreats. The musicians were dismissed with a flick of a steward's hand. Servants began collecting untouched trays, their movements careful and silent. The party was dissolving, not with announcement, with consequence. Hajia Amina watched it happen, and for the first time since the evening began, her control slipped visibly. This woman has bewitched all of you, she snapped. The room recoiled. Not because everyone became noble at once, but because the accusation was ugly, desperate, and beneath the polished dignity she had spent a lifetime curating. No, Ibrahim said. Truth did this. He turned and reached for Yusuf's hand. The boy looked up at him, and after only the smallest hesitation let him take it. That simple gesture carried more meaning than any speech left in the room. Then Ibrahim looked at Zainab. His voice softened but did not weaken. You are leaving this house with respect. It was not a request. It was a correction. Hajia Amina opened her mouth again, perhaps to argue, perhaps to command. Perhaps simply because silence had become unbearable to her. But one of the elders raised his hand. Enough, he said. And this time she listened. Not willingly, but publicly. That mattered. Ibrahim turned to the assembled family and the few guests still lingering. From today, he said, Yusuf will be known as my son. His education, welfare, and future are my responsibility. And Zainab will never again be turned away from any place connected to my name. He paused, then added the sentence that truly finished the night. Anyone who cannot respect that cannot stand with me. There it was. The line, clean, final, expensive in every possible way. Several relatives looked down. A few looked offended. Some looked frightened. A handful, surprisingly, looked relieved, because even in powerful families there are often people who privately hate the lies but lack the courage to confront them, until someone stronger goes first. Zainab felt the room shifting around her like a structure settling after a storm. This was not healing, not yet. Maybe not for a long time. But it was justice beginning to take shape. Messy, late, painful, yet real. Yusuf squeezed Ibrahim's fingers and whispered, "Are we going home now?" Ibrahim looked at him, then at Zainab. And for the first time the word home did not sound simple. It sounded like something they would have to build carefully from broken pieces. "Yes," he said quietly, "we are." And as they turned away from the crumbling remains of the evening, leaving behind the broken party, the wounded pride and the high walls that had once shut them out, one truth walked out with them stronger than all the rest. The people who had been treated like shame were not the disgrace. They were the ones who survived it. The drive back from the Musa estate was quieter than any of them expected. Not because there was nothing to say, but because some nights are too heavy for words to carry properly. Ibrahim sat behind the wheel, his hands steady even though his mind was not. The city lights slipped past the windows in broken lines of gold and white. In the back seat, Yusuf had fallen asleep with his head resting against Zainab's arm, his small body finally surrendering to the exhaustion of a night no child should ever have had to endure. Zainab stared out the window, her face calm in appearance, but Ibrahim could feel the storm still moving beneath it. The humiliation, the exposure, the strange, disorienting fact that justice had finally begun to arrive in the very place where she had once been rejected. It should have felt victorious. Instead, it felt fragile. Because victory did not erase damage, it only proved that damage had been real all along. When they reached the small compound, Ibrahim stepped out first and carefully lifted Yusuf into his arms. The boy stirred only slightly, then settled again against his chest. That simple weight undid something inside Ibrahim, his son. Not an idea, not a test result, not a wound from the past. His son. He carried Yusuf into the room, with a tenderness that came naturally now as though some buried instinct had finally found its place. Zainab spread the thin sheet over the mattress, and Ibrahim lowered the boy gently onto it. For a few seconds, both adults stood there looking down at him in silence. Yusuf slept with the innocence only children could still possess after standing in the middle of adult cruelty, and somehow that made everything hurt more. Zainab turned away, first. "I'll boil water," she said quietly. Ibrahim nodded, though he knew she was not really talking about water. She was talking about movement, needing something small and ordinary to do so. She would not have to face all her feelings at once. He understood that, because he needed it too. A little later, they sat across from each other in the same small room that had become the center of everything that mattered. A metal cup of tea rested untouched between them. The fan still clicked every few seconds as it turned, sounding tired, but stubborn, like the life Zainab had built. For a long while, neither of them spoke. Then Zainab finally did. "You embarrassed your mother." There was no accusation in her voice, no approval either, just fact. Ibrahim exhaled. She embarrassed herself. Zainab looked down at her hands. "She will never forgive this." "I'm not asking her to. That doesn't mean she won't fight back." He knew she was right. Women like Hajia Amina did not surrender gracefully. They retreated, regrouped, calculated. Pride that large always looked for another path to control. But Ibrahim was no longer afraid of control. Not from her, not from anyone. "She can fight," he said, "but she cannot erase the truth now." Zainab's lips pressed together. "Truth doesn't always protect people." "No," he admitted, "but silence didn't protect you either." That landed between them, heavy, honest. Zainab leaned back slightly, the exhaustion in her eyes more visible now that the night was over. "I kept imagining this moment for years," she said softly. "Not this exact moment. Just the idea that one day someone would finally say I was not lying." Ibrahim looked at her, listening with his whole body. and now that it happened, she continued. I don't know what to do with it. He understood, because justice delayed did not arrive as relief. It arrived as grief for everything it had taken too long to save. I know saying sorry is not enough, Ibrahim said. Zainab gave a faint, tired smile. No, it isn't. I know paying school fees is not enough. No, I know standing up for you once in public is not enough. She met his gaze then. No, Ibrahim, it isn't. He nodded slowly. Then tell me what enough looks like. The question stayed in the room a long time. Zainab did not answer quickly, because she had learned not to trust easy words, especially not beautiful ones. Beautiful words had once lived under a mango tree and promised her forever. She had buried too much to be fooled by language. Finally, she said, enough looks like consistency. Ibrahim stayed silent, letting her continue. It looks like Yusuf not having to wonder if you will disappear again. It looks like decisions that are made with him in mind, not just emotion. It looks like you understanding that you cannot return and act like pain should step aside, because you finally came back. There it was. The truth in its full shape. Not romance, not drama, responsibility. I can do that, Ibrahim said quietly. You don't know that yet. He accepted the correction. You're right, he said. I haven't proven it yet. That mattered to her more than he realized. Not the promise, but the humility. Because pride had broken enough of her life already. The next morning, Ibrahim did not leave. He did not rush off to take calls, to repair reputation, to calm investors, to reclaim control of his public life. Instead, he stayed. He walked Yusuf to school. He came back with bread and eggs and fruit. He fixed the broken latch on the small window. He took a call from his assistant, and in Zainab's hearing instructed that a house search begin immediately. Not a mansion, not something extravagant, but a safe, dignified home, close to Yusuf's school and far enough from the Musa estate to feel like peace. He arranged medical checkups, a savings trust for Yusuf, legal recognition papers, every practical thing that pain and poverty had been denied for too long. And he did not do it with performance. He did it with attention. That was what began to shift something in Zainab. Not the money itself, not even the speed, but the fact that he was no longer speaking like a man trying to be forgiven. He was moving like a father trying to be responsible. Days passed, then a week, then more. The city talked, of course. Families like the Musas were not scandalized quietly. Rumors traveled through markets, mosques, salons, offices, gated compounds, and WhatsApp groups with breathtaking speed. Some called Zainab lucky, others called her calculating. Some praised Ibrahim for doing the right thing. Others accused him of humiliating his mother for a poor woman. But Ibrahim stopped caring about public language the moment he saw how little it had ever protected what was true. He rented a modest but beautiful home with a small courtyard and enough light to make the rooms feel hopeful. Yusuf got his own bed for the first time in his life. The boy ran his fingers over the smooth wood frame, as though he could not believe it belonged to him. Is this really mine? He asked. Yes, Ibrahim said. Yusuf looked at Zainab first, needing her confirmation more than anyone else's. When she nodded, he smiled in a way that made the whole room feel new, and slowly, the shape of family began to change. Not magically, not all at once. Some mornings Yusuf woke full of joy and questions, climbing into Ibrahim's lap with school stories and impossible curiosity. Other days he grew quiet, watching him too carefully, as if still testing whether fathers were real things or temporary events. Zainab had her own distances. She accepted help, but not dependency. She listened, but did not melt. She smiled sometimes, but never carelessly. Ibrahim respected all of it, because love rebuilt after damage was not soft at first. It was deliberate. It was cautious. It was earned in small moments. One evening, weeks later, they sat outside in the small courtyard while Yusuf chased a ball nearby. The sky above Kano had softened into orange and gold. For the first time in years, there was no emergency in the air. No gate, no humiliation, no waiting room, no performance, just evening, just breath, just a chance. "I used to hate sunsets," Zainab said suddenly. Ibrahim turned to her. "Why?" "Because that was the time I missed you most." The honesty of it cut gently, this time, not like a blade, but like an old scar being touched. "I missed you too," he said. She looked at him for a long moment. Not enough to come back then. He accepted the pain of that. "No," he said, "not in the way that mattered." A faint silence followed. Then Ibrahim reached into his pocket and brought out a small box. Zainab's body stiffened almost immediately. He noticed and gave the smallest shake of his head. "No pressure," he said softly. "Just let me speak." She didn't move. He opened the box. Inside was a simple ring. Beautiful, but not loud. Chosen with care, not pride. "I should have asked years ago," he said. "Back when love was easy and poverty was the only thing standing against us. I didn't. Then life broke everything it could. And, still, somehow we're here." Zainab's eyes glistened, but she stayed silent. "I'm not asking you to forget," Ibrahim continued. "I'm not asking you to pretend the years didn't happen. I'm asking whether you can imagine a future where I spend the rest of my life proving that I learned from them." Yusuf, sensing something important, stopped playing and wandered closer, holding the ball to his chest. Ibrahim looked at him, then back at Zainab. "I love you," he said, not with the careless confidence of the boy I was, but with the humility of a man who knows what it costs to lose what matters. "Zainab, will you marry me?" The world seemed to go still. No music, no audience, no chandeliers, just a courtyard, an evening sky, and truth stripped down to its most human form. Zainab looked at the ring, then at Ibrahim, then at Yusuf, who was staring with wide, hopeful eyes. When she spoke, her voice trembled, but not from weakness. "I won't say yes because of what happened at that house," she said. "And I won't say yes because you have money. I know. I will say yes," she whispered, "because for the first time in a very long time, you stayed." Something inside Ibrahim broke open with relief so deep it almost hurt. "Yes," he asked, almost like he needed to hear it twice. A tear slipped down her cheek, but she was smiling now. Small, real, hard-won. "Yes." Yusuf let out a sudden shout of joy, dropping the ball and throwing himself between them. Ibrahim laughed a full, unguarded laugh. Zainab had not heard from him in years and pulled them both close. And there in that small courtyard, far from wealth, pride, and performance, they became what they should have been long ago. Not perfect, not untouched, but whole. In time there was a wedding, not extravagant, not political, not staged for the approval of people who only loved appearances. It was warm, honest, filled with those who had stood by truth when truth was still expensive. Halima cried openly. Yusuf carried the rings with more seriousness than most grown men. Even some of the elders from that terrible night attended quietly, as if trying in their own way to honor what should never have been denied. Hajia Amina did not come. But by then her absence no longer had the power it once did, because Ibrahim had already chosen his family. And Zainab, after years of surviving alone, no longer needed the approval of the house that had once shut her out. She had something stronger now. A husband who learned too late, but learned. A son who no longer had to ask where he belonged. A home built not on status, but on truth. And that truth, though painful in its path, had finally led them somewhere. Love could live without apology. After everything, one truth remains. Life does not always wound us in ways that look dramatic from the outside. Sometimes the deepest pain comes from being denied, ignored, misunderstood, or left to carry a burden alone while the world keeps moving. But even then, truth has a way of rising. It may come late, It may come after tears, humiliation, and years that can never be returned. But when it comes, it gives dignity back to the people who were once treated like they did not matter. Zainab's story reminds us that strength is not always loud. Sometimes strength is a woman waking up every day to protect her child with nothing but tired hands and a faithful heart. Ibrahim's journey reminds us that success means very little if it costs us the people we should have loved better. And Yusuf reminds us that children do not ask for wealth first. They ask for truth, presence, and belonging. If this story touched your heart, share your thoughts in the comments. Tell us where you are watching from and what lesson stayed with you the most. And if you believe love, justice, and second chances still matter in this world, please subscribe, like, and share this story with someone who needs hope today. John Juan Tat, Kichbon.